You know when you tuck yourself into bed at the end of a long day, but you can't help but feel like there's so much more you could have done? You feel like you raced against time and did everything you thought you could, but you're just not satisfied. So you toss and turn under the sheets for many insomniac minutes as your brain rushes to plan for more than 24 hours tomorrow so that you can finally finish enough things so that you can make time for an even longer to-do list the following day. It is a very, very vicious and never-ending cycle because, unfortunately, hustle culture has become so embedded in our minds that it manifests itself as a constant and nagging sense of guilt and insufficiency, regardless of what we do or how well we do it. But this is not an episode about hustle culture, though. Although we will be touching upon hustle culture, maybe even a lot. Because I want to say that it is all okay, to a certain extent, to hustle, so long as the things we hustle for are meaningful. I tend to be on the high standards team. I do not see myself as being a perfectionist by any stretch of the imagination, though I do like to know that I have done things well. Working hard at things that matter to us is a good quality to have, I believe, but all within reason, all within healthy reason. What this episode is about, then, is what happens to our self-image when we go through seasons of circumstantial difficulties and find that our capacity for hustle and overachievement simply isn't what it used to be when things were going well. Really, what happens? What happens when we break up or face health issues or lose our jobs or find it physically impossible to hyper-focus on any one task the way that we used to be able to do before? Can we be happy with doing a few things well enough? Can we establish enough space between ourselves and our hustles to a point where we can be satisfied with just good enough? So, get yourself nice and cozy, and let's begin today's conversation. Hey friend, welcome back or welcome here to the Being Allowed podcast. As always, I'm your host, B. Boucher, and I'm ready to talk about this conversation with you because I'm still unloading it and processing it myself. And as you figured out from the introduction, today we're talking about an antidote to hustle culture because if you're anything like me, you have had enough. You're over it. You're done with the hustle culture because we reach a certain level or a certain stage in our lives when we realize, something's broken in the system and something's just not working. And some of us find that out in a very painful way, and others find that out early on. And my aim with this episode is just to kind of, if you're still early on, hear it from me. You heard it here first. But yeah, I feel like we all need to hear this, okay? So to start us off, I looked up the definition of hustle culture in the Urban Dictionary, and I just want to read it for you. And it is the glorification of working very long hours in hope of reaching one's professional goals while having a disregard for their health and relationships with loved ones. Now, if you're really, really honest with yourself, really, really honest with yourself, 9 out of 10 of us probably will be able to say, yep, I am a part of hustle culture. Regardless of what your professional goals look like. They could be, you are the owner of an NGO, and so you believe in the purpose behind what you're doing, and it's a very, good, noble cause that you're working towards, but you're working so, so hard to achieve those goals at the price of and at the cost of your health and your relationship with loved ones. Or you could be stuck in a 9 to 5 where you work corporate and it's really a grind, but you know you want to get ahead on the ladder and everything like that. And so you work super, super hard. You invest in your work relationships maybe, but you neglect your health and you neglect your actual lasting relationships. Wherever you are in life, this is an invitation for you to pause and be very, 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 very honest. Like, be really, really honest with yourself. To what degree, like if we could say from 0 to 10, 0 being the least hustle culture-y and 10 being the most hustle culture-y, where are you on that spectrum? Because finding out where you are on that spectrum is going to determine a lot in regards to the rest of this episode. So pause if you need and really, really ask yourself that tough question. Okay? So I personally realized that I am a hamster in this hamster wheel, in the hustle culture hamster wheel. A few things kind of hinted at that over the past few years. And most recently, it was actually the least alarming of all. But that was when I was like, yep, this is this is the reality for me and I need to figure out a way to come out of this, right? And I was like, as always, I need to share this with the podcast homies. But yeah, where last week I had this really weird cold. It lasted for like a day and a half, literally just a day and a half, where I had a high enough fever that my body felt like it was hit by a truck and I physically couldn't get out of bed, but it wasn't high enough that I needed like antibiotics or, to consider anything serious or whatever. And truly, it lasted for a day and a half. I was in bed for just a day and a half. And especially that first day, I was unable to get out of bed. I was like, okay, since I'm in bed, I'm going to work on, I'll do computer work. I'll do, my actual work. And then I was like, and also this is a great opportunity for me to work on, the podcast and YouTube and stuff like that. All computer work. But I was so dead that I could not even do any of that. Okay. And I remember I felt like it was the end of the world. I was like, this is such a waste of time. And oh my gosh, how long is this illness and disease gonna last? Because I can't afford to have it last for a long time because I'm an important woman. Okay. I have important things to tend to. I need to do the podcast. I need to do YouTube. I need to do this week's vlog. I need to get my computer work done, my actual work done. I need to la 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 la, as though the entire universe is going to collapse without me. I remember another time, I even shared about this in YouTube, where last year, towards the end of last year, I believe it was like October of last year, I got such a bad case of burnout where I was aware of all the things I wanted to do and all the things I quote unquote had to do. But everything was like just too much. Like there were things going on in my personal life and there were things going on in my like career life, things that I want to do to make advancements and improve and, be better and all that stuff. And everything was just clashing. And I remember I just reached a point where I was just like, this is just not going to work. This is really, really, really not just good. This is just not going to work. And what ended up happening was that I spent months just in a complete state of burnout, like truly, truly, like where I would open my computer and I couldn't even read words, like I would have to read any given sentence like 1,001 times. And then I would be like, okay, I want to go on a walk, for example. And sure, there's like a subconscious thought in my brain, or it's conscious enough that I'm aware that I need to go on a walk, but it's subconscious in the sense of I'm unable to physically, send a message from my brain to my legs so that I could get up and go on a walk. You know what I mean? It was such a terrible case of burnout. And I remember that the reason why I stayed in that burnout was because of hustle culture. Was because I, for the longest time, was a member of this club, this miserable club, where I believed I needed to do more and achieve more and fill every waking hour of every waking day with something productive. And then I realized, okay, so this sense of I'm not doing enough, or oh my goodness, I'm very overwhelmed because I need to be doing more, or oh my goodness, I go to sleep at night, all I think about is work or whatever. I realized that that was like something that I needed to really bring to a pause long enough to actually assess and be introspective. Last week when I was sick, I was like, yeah, this is a recurring pattern and a recurring theme. And not just with me, but it's with probably everybody that I know. We all go out, we talk about work, right? Like as though there's nothing else that's worth our time or worth our conversation or worth our attention but work. Now, don't get me wrong. Work is a very, very good thing. I think it's one of the things that is a privilege, like being a person who is able to work, who is able to, especially if you work something that actually fulfills you, or if you work something that gives you the opportunity to work something on the side that fulfills you, which is my case, then that is a beautiful privilege. But to what extent does that privilege start losing its magic and start inflicting harm? And actually being something that is very counterproductive and counterintuitive even. That is when we get sick, or that is when something else outside of ourselves happens in our lives that makes us stop and realize, oh my gosh, I actually can't keep working because I have these circumstances, let's say, whatever, an illness in the family or a breakup, or someone you love that's super close to you is going through something huge and now you are required to take care of that person. Like whatever external circumstance goes on, that is when you realize, okay, real life conflicts with hustle culture. And that is when you have to ask yourself, what is a priority? How do I want to live my life? Right? I've recently come to the conclusion that life is too short, which is very sad. It's very sad when because it's one thing to know it in your brain. It's quite another to know it for real, like in your life. But life is too short. Life is so short. Our lives are so short, and the lives of those around us are so short. And what we don't realize is that we spend most of our days consumed with work, consumed with pouring into whatever is going to bring in the next paycheck at the end of the month, which is important. I'm not saying it's not important, but we let that consume us, like absolutely consume us, so that we miss out on our own lives. And more importantly, we miss out on the lives of those that we love, thinking that time is for granted when life is very not for granted. Life is very, very, very short. I remember as I was doing research for this episode, I saw a video. Was it a video or a podcast or a book actually, or an article? I don't remember. I expose myself to lots of things. But anyway, something said, it was a TED Talk, yes. Where this guy, he's an American and he went to France on like a work retreat or something. And he was up at 5 a.m. And was at the office already at 8, already buried in work, and looked up at a certain point at 8:15 or whatever, and looked around him at the office and was like, I'm the only one here. Why isn't anyone else here? I literally woke up at 5 a.m. and it's now 8 a.m. and no one's here. I'm the only one that's here. And then people started slowly trickling into the office at 10 a.m. And then at 12, after working for 2 whole hours, the people at the office were like, hey, we're going to lunch. Would you like to join us? And so he was like, okay, well, might as well. And so he went to lunch with the people, where they actually left the office and went to a park, I believe, if I remember correctly. And they spent an hour and a half to 2 hours having lunch. And then they returned to their offices. Let's say it's 1:30 at this point. And then they worked until 5 p.m. sharp. And at 5 p.m., everyone closed their laptops. And there was no work calls, No work emails, nothing coming through until 10 a.m. the next day. And he was just saying how insane that is. Like, wow, where I come from, we start work at like 8. We're at our desks and we don't finish work before like 7 or 8, and then work comes with us to the bedroom. It comes with us to the living room. It comes with us to the dining room. And we're sending emails back and forth and we're, having phone calls all the time. And here is an entire society of people, an entire culture of people that seems to be doing just fine without overworking at all. And this was his same company. So the work is the same thing. The goal, the objective of the company was the exact same thing. It's just the culture of work. And it got me asking myself, like, to what extent do we decide what is normal? Like, what is normal? Is it normal to be working 1,000,001 hours a day? Like, honestly, I'm not going to lie. Okay. I never actually externally verbalized this before. But within my friend group, I always felt this like underlying shame from their end to my end. Not because they mean to and not because they're bad people. By the way, my friends are actually the best. Like everybody who knows me knows I literally won the lottery with my friends. But I've always felt this like sense of shame because they all work excruciatingly long hours. And then we go out and they all talk about work. And I'm always the kind of person that's like rolling her eyes. Like, I don't want to talk about work. And they're all like, oh, okay, sorry, whatever. And it's as though I don't work hard. Like, I'm always made to feel like I don't work hard. They work harder than me because they're unable to disconnect from their work. They work harder than me. And I'm just in a bubble. Like, just in a privileged bubble. But when I'm honest with myself, that's not the truth at all. I actually work extremely hard. Like, I work very, very hard. When I show up for work, I'm there 100%. And I'm able to get so much more done in much less time. And not to toot my own horn, but I know how hard I work, but I'm able to disconnect because I've realized that to me, things other than work are also very, 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 very important, such as my relationships, such as doing a side hustle that actually is meaningful, which also to me is work, but it's good work, it's meaningful work, and things like that. And so how do we establish a healthy equilibrium? I believe that has to start with a degree of self-compassion. Ironically enough, I did a Q&A on Instagram this morning, and a lovely girl messaged me and asked, I feel like I'm in a very transitional phase in my life, and a lot is changing, and I don't feel like I'm able to do as much as I once was able to do. And how do I extend kindness to myself, knowing that this is the best that I can do right now? And I want to introduce you to the climax of today's episode, which is the concept of good enough. The concept of good enough, because I learned that concept last year. 2023 was when I decided that all I'm going to aim towards in my life is just good enough. And you know what? Good enough is just going to have to be good enough. Because like I said in the introduction, I actually have very high standards for myself. I like to work hard and I like to do things well. So when I do something, I like to do it well, which means that I have to be efficient if I don't have time, which means that I need to capitalize on moments when my attention span is actually there. In a world full of things that are changing and things that are completely out of my hands, I need to learn how to work smart and not hard. And my way of combating hustle culture is basically a decision. It is a decision to do the best that I can and then knowing when to stop and say that this was good enough. And let me tell you that some days good enough is going to be amazing. Some days good enough is going to be you on fire. Literally getting 1,000,001 things done in a very short amount of time with much less energy than it would take you on another day. Some days that's what good enough is going to look like, But other days, good enough is just going to be, I checked one thing off my to-do list and it was the easiest thing. I found the easiest thing that I could check off. I checked it off and that's it. I'm done. I am done. Because I believe that we did we did hustle culture to ourselves. We inflicted hustle culture to ourselves. I also don't remember where I read this or heard this. I think it was a podcast actually last week. Podcast episode where a woman was saying, you know what? We think, like, we've come to believe that we are machines and therefore a machine must produce blah, 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 blah. At the end of the day. And then at the end of the week, you have to have this much to show for your effort and for the fact that you showed up to work. And a machine needs to la, 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 la. But I mean, I hate to be the one to break this to you, but you're not a machine. I know, it sucks. It really sucks. Some days we do wish we were machines, but you're not a machine and I am not a machine. You know what differentiates us from machines? Well, we have emotions, we have experiences, we have real life circumstances. We are members of a very absurd society and community where we can't always guarantee what's going to happen or what's going to come of our lives or what tomorrow holds or what the next hour holds. Ta-da, surprise. We are actually not God. We are very, very finite, very futile, very precarious beings, and we don't get a say. And so with the mix of emotions, with the mix of change and having to navigate different seasons, like, have you ever considered what our bodies go through from season to season? Have you ever considered what our minds have to adapt to from season to season? And let me tell you, we are very adaptable beings. Human beings have the capacity to adapt. Otherwise, we would not make it out of traumas. We would not make it out of difficult seasons or difficult circumstances at all. But you know what it takes for us to adapt, to change? Time. And in the meantime, literally in the meantime, it is impossible for us to function on the same level as though life isn't happening, as though everything's normal. Because whether that's good change or bad change, you will experience change. I'm coming at you from the future. And you could be listening to this or watching this in the middle of a season of change. It's true. Change is the only constant. The only thing we know for sure is change. It's the one thing that doesn't change, is change. So how are we expecting ourselves to be machines? Steadfast, continuous machines that produce the same amount of work, the same amount of outcome and output at the end of every day, at the end of every week, at the end of every month, quarter, mid-year, end of year, 5 years. How? We are expecting something of ourselves that is impossible. And so self-compassion is absolutely necessary. And I believe self-compassion takes introspection, being able to say, okay, this is the season I'm in right now. These are the changes I'm currently experiencing. This is the stage of life that I'm going through right now. These are the external circumstances, some of which are within my own control and some are without my control. And we already talked about this in previous episodes. Try to figure out what's within your control and what is not within your control. And then be like, okay, given where I am today, given the season I'm in right now, this will have to be good enough. And let me tell you, this way of thinking, like, I knew this episode was coming because I've been preparing for it for a couple of weeks. And so I like have been trying to practice what I'm preaching. I've been trying to practice good enough. And yesterday, the night before, I barely got any sleep. My sleep was so terrible. And so yesterday I woke up and I was like, okay, I'm trying really, really, really hard to get back into like a workout routine and a healthy movement routine, because it's always been who I am. It's the way I thrive. It's the way I'm able to show up as my best self is when I'm actively working out, 4 to 6 times a week, maybe. But I knew I hadn't slept, and I still knew I really wanted to move. And so I was like, okay, I will do something, because I'm the type of person who expects a lot from herself. So I'm like, I'll do something. I will do a gentle yoga flow. I did a gentle yoga flow, and then I had lunch, and I found that I had it in me to go for a walk, but it was just a brisk walk. I was like, sure, I usually like to go on more like fast-paced walks, kind of like the one I went on today. I like fast walks, really active, burn a lot of calories, move a lot of body, But I was like, no, all I have in me is a brisk walk. So I did a brisk walk, and it was good enough. I also hadn't slept, and so the amount of work I could do and could produce was very little. So I looked at what my priorities were, what I absolutely had to do, what emails I had to send, what things I needed to do. And I did the top priority things, the urgent things, the important things. And that was good enough. And you know what happened? I went to sleep last night. I got better sleep. I woke up feeling a little bit better and was able to do more today. And today's good enough was quantifiably more than yesterday, but qualitatively the same. Because there's a quote that says, on days when you only have 30%, but you give 30%, you actually gave 100%. And that is good enough. Okay, so I don't know if it's pride or ego or what that makes us believe that we can operate like machines. That makes us believe that we have to squeeze ourselves of every single last droplet of blood in the name of work and career and advancement and more money and more money and more money. Like, I believe that it is actually a very subtle, unaddressed degree of pride that makes us believe that the world is going to end if we don't absolutely come to the end of ourselves on a very frequent basis, all in the name of work. I mean, we believe the world's going to end, even though we don't say it. But the way we live our lives proves that we think the world is going to end. And I don't know. I don't want to live like a machine because I can't, because I'm not a machine. I can't. So I don't want to pretend to be able to live like one when I am a person, and I'm a person with very finite and limited capacities for that kind of work. And I need time to refuel, and I need areas in my life that enable me to refuel. And I also have priorities. And while making money and living comfortably, living as well as I possibly can is important, what's even more important is pouring into the lives of those around me, spending time with people that I absolutely love, leaving an interpersonal mark on people's lives, people who I love, because that's what's gonna last. At my deathbed, no one's gonna know how much money I made on a monthly basis and how much more money I made by taking on this extra project on top of every single other thing that I'm already doing. No, what people are gonna remember, the legacy that actually lives on and is worth it, is how you made people feel, what impact you had on people's lives, how much time you spent with people you absolutely loved, how many memories you created with people. There are things that are more important than work, at least equally as important as work. And remember that you are not a machine. So you can't operate like a machine. You are a person with feelings. You are a person with transitions. You're a person with ups and downs. So stop pretending like you're a machine, because you're not. And yeah, I hope today's episode kind of encourages you to look within. And I want to leave you with a journaling prompt or an invitation to just journal. I kind of gave you an invitation at the start of the podcast to pause and ask yourself where you really are at in terms of the hustle culture wheel, or, on a scale from 0 to 10. But now maybe pause and journal on what changes you can make in your life so that you can do less, literally do less, and move through your life with more slowness. Because slowness invites intention, and intention makes you produce better work in reality. So, yeah. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode, or for watching today's episode on YouTube. If you are on our growing YouTube family, I would like to encourage you to please hit the subscribe button. Also hit the bell little icon so that you can get notifications from me whenever I post a vlog, which usually happens on the weekends, or whenever I post a new podcast episode. Thank you so much for being here. Please leave your comments in the comment section and let's have a conversation. And also let me know what it is that you'd like us to talk about next time. And I can't wait to see you again next time.